Hello there, this is one of a series of videos accompanying the Joomla tutorial developing an MVC component. And in this step we're looking at the basic backend, and I'm going to split this into two videos. The first video I'm going to look at the overall MVC structure and the pagination, and then in the second video I'll look at some of the HTML aspects. Now, to save time, I've copied all of the code from the from the page into my code base here. I've also added a number of new records into the database. I've added a number of hello world messages, so I've got 30 records all in total, and this is the update file, this is the install file. I've also installed it on Joomla, so I've got here version 7. Now when we go to click on components and hello world, and we log in, we see this, and we've got these links here, so I can click on page 2, which takes me on to the second page, or this to the final page. So it all seems to be working fine, but let's start by taking a look at the code. Now, if you were watching some of the earlier videos, in particular, I think it might have been the second video, I showed this slide of the overall MVC structure. So this is on the site, and the admin is exactly the same as the site. So whereas on the site it runs the hello world.php file in the site, in the admin side of things it runs the hello world.php file in the admin area. But everything is pretty much the same. If we look at that file that it runs, it's pretty much the same as the site side of things. We get an instance of the hello world controller. That's this bit, and that runs our controller code, which is here, defining our class. And then after that we find the task parameter, and in this case we're not going to get a task parameter, so this is going to revert to the default of display, and then we run that display method within our controller, and that's going to get our view and our model instantiated, and then it's going to call display on our view, which is going to run the layout file, and which is going to display all of this stuff here within our admin side of things. So it all works pretty much the same as on the site side of things. There's only a little difference in our controller file here. We've got this line here, protected default view is hello worlds, and that works because if we look at our hello world, our default controller, if we go into our Joomla code, our legacy, what we've got here is we're extending JController legacy, and the code for JController legacy we can find in our Joomla instance. It's in under libraries, legacy, controller, legacy.php. And if we open that, we see that this here, default view, is declared there, and then whenever we do a get instance of the view, which let me try finding where this is called. We get the view here, which is usually specified within the URL. But if there isn't a view in the URL, it will go to that default view. And what we're doing here in our controller is we're overriding that default view so that whenever it comes here in the display function to set up the view instance, it will take that as a default instead of what would usually be the default, which would be hello world. Now, you may think this a bit strange, and to be honest, I do myself, that we're really changing something which is really within the design. But if you look at many of the other standard Joomla components, they really take the same approach. And if you look at content, for example, let's just maybe get that. We can go to our admin components. Content. Let's look at this. And there we see default view is articles. And really what seems to happen a lot is that people, whenever they're developing Joomla kind of extensions and that, really copy a lot of the existing functionality, say, for example, from content. So that's what content does. It sets its default view to be articles in the admin side. So that is copied really whenever people develop their own extensions. And the fact that it's done within Joomla is rather reassuring. Also, the fact that whenever it declares it here, it declares it as protected. So maybe the developers had a notion of people being able to override it. So let me just clear that. So that's our controller. And then if we go to our view, it will instantiate our view. And this has got a couple of extra lines in it. This items is calling get items, and then this is get pagination. So this is what we're going to look at in this video. And if you remember from our previous video, this function here, get with items, will be a function within the JView legacy. And what it will do is it will convert that get, and in brackets items, to a call get items within the model. And similarly, get in brackets pagination will get converted into a call get pagination within the model. And the way it works, I've drawn on this slide here. So our call to get items within our view gets translated to a call, get items within the model. Now here's our model. This is our Hello World's model that we've defined, and we are inheriting from JModelList. We go back to our code for this is it. This is our model. Hello World, remember it's Hello World is the component model, and then it's the view name, extends JModelList, and JModelList in turn will subclass JModelLegacy. But we have converted our getItems call into getItems here within our model. And the getItems call within our model calls another function, which is getList. And it passes 3 parameters to that guest list. First parameter is passes is the result of a call to our getList query. And this is the code that we have actually put into our own class here. So it calls our function here that we've defined to get the query that it needs to run on the database to find the records. And then it passes 2 other parameters, list start and list limit. And what happens is that there are a couple of parameters which are maintained within the JModel legacy, which are the list start and the list limit, and those really define the set of records which are going to be pulled from the database. So it's going to start at a record number, whatever is defined by this parameter, and it's going to find the number of records defined by this parameter. And this parameter start is going to be 0 initially, and list limit is going to be extracted from our global config. So if we go down to global config, and it's this parameter here, default list limit, which is set on my system to 10, and that's what it's going to get, and it's going to bring that into there. And so get items is going to call, as I say, get items there. It's going to call get list, which is going to run our query and find the number of records, which is set to limit, starting at start. And then it's going to return those records to get items, which is going to then in turn return that set of data records to our call get items. So you may have thought that get items was actually going to retrieve all of the records in our database table, but it doesn't actually. It only returns the number of records, which is defined by this parameter list limit. So the next step then is get pagination, and get pagination again will get converted into a call in our model, which is get pagination here. And what it does, it calls a new pagination, sets up a new pagination instance through Pagination. Whoops, if you go on here, this is Pagination, which is a description of the API. So it's going to call Pagination, and it's going to pass 3 parameters to that. It's going to pass the total number of records, and it's going to get the total number of records by actually running our query on the database, so it knows what the total number of records is. It's going to pass the list start, which, as I said, is initially going to be 0, and the number of records. And when you think about pagination really just requires those 3 things. It needs to know the total number of records, where it's starting for this page, and the number of records on that page. And with that information, Pagination can provide details which enable us to create these items down here. So it knows that there should be 3 pages, because there are 30 records in all, and there's 10 records per page, and starting at 21 here, so it knows to grey these out. There's no more pages after this. So as I say, we'll get this new pagination record, and then it will return that instance to our pagination object. Now this pagination object, which is returned, will be stored by us locally. So if we go to our view, store this in a property of our instance here, and then we can use it later on to get all these things which are associated with the pagination class. And in particular, we go to our default.php, we call this is our pagination object, and we call getListFooter. And that getListFooter, it will, as it says here, return the pagination footer. And what that is was this down here. So it returns a bit of HTML which represents all of these items here. So let's see that. We switch on our debug, our developer tools. We can actually look at some of these items here. So I've clicked on one here, and what it's showing is that this is an A. I'm not sure if I can. Oops. Can't really magnify that, but it's showing an A, an anchor tag, and with an on click being, I'll copy this and then put it in here so you can see it better. So this is our on click. Document admin form limit start value equals 0. Joomla submit form return false. So what it's doing is setting this value limit start to 0, and then it's submitting the form and returning false. And the fact of returning false means that the normal operation of this, which is an A tag, which is a link, won't actually get done, but it will submit a form, and whenever we click on that, that will then go back to our Joomla server. If we compare that, say, with to here, it's going to set the value to be 10. I hope you can see that. And that means that whenever I click on this, if I click on this and then look at the URL that has been sent, if I look at post, the post parameters that have been sent then to Joomla in that HTTP request have included limit start equals 10. Now that will then come in to here, and whenever Joomla starts processing, it's going to set this, whoops, shouldn't do that. It's going to set this list.start value based on that limit start, which is set there. So that the next time that this is run, get items will then come through here, and to get the items, it will run our query again. List start will now be 10, and list limit will be the same as before. So it will get a different set of records starting at record 10 and pass those back for display. And obviously, if we close that down, you can see it's on page 2. Limit start is 10. So the first one, limit start, is equal to 0. So the first page, 10 records, goes from 0 to 9. This goes from 10 to 19. And I can go and I can, for example, change that. I can change this to, let's put it to 5. Save, close. Oops. And there you see it's now showing 5 records. So limit start is still set to 10, and the limit is now set to 5. So I hope that's clear. Pagination has actually set up these things here, and it's done that based on knowing how many records in total there are, what the current page is, and what the limit is. And we can actually see things working if we go and change some of the code within Joomla. I mentioned that these are in libraries. So we have got here libraries legacy model. Here we are. So let's try changing these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just rename that. to list original, and I'll edit that, and then I'll save a copy as list.php. So now what I can do is I can change this list.php, and when I'm finished with messing around with it, I can restore it from my list original. So let's go down, and we'll go down to get items. And it's got a couple of things here. Get start and get state of list.limit. So let's just see what those variables are. We'll put some, we'll put some statements up here. And then we'll do an echo statement. Echo okay, so we've changed that, and let's just see if that's now working. We refresh this page. No. I'm changing list original. That's why the problem is. So let's, oops. Let's just copy that. And we'll restore list original to it. Its original state. So Control Z, and then we'll open this file. Okay, let's just stick a. Let's see if that's working. Okay, in get items with start 10 and limit 5. Okay, and we can also go through to the model, and we'll do the same sort of thing there. And we'll save a copy as PHP, and we'll close it this time and open this one. And we were looking for some function. Let me just check what the function was. It's getList. Okay, there we go. So let's just see Oops, in underscore get list start, limit start, and okay, and we'll try that again. Okay, so you can see again that it's trying to get records starting at number 10 and number 5. And finally, let's go into Pagination. Now, Pagination is somewhere else. It is in, I think, CMS. There it is there. Oh. And don't do this a different nation. No. And let's go down to the constructor. And you can see the constructors pass the total, the limit start, and the limit. So let's just echo those. In pagination constructor with start, limit start, and okay. And one last time we'll click this. Okay, so you can see as we go along, it's calling get items, and you can see the start values and the limit values that are passed. And it's interesting actually to go to other extensions and compare those as well. Other parts of Joomla, and just see if they use this same sort of thing. Actually, remember where I am. I'm at number 21 here. So if we go to extensions and manage, for example, obviously we have changed the core Joomla functions here. So some of these will use this, some of them won't. If we go to the next, say, 5 extensions, we can see that get items is being used and pagination, but we are not using underscore get list. So some of these functions will be used and some of them won't, and you can have a look at other areas of Joomla and see which do and which don't. Now the interesting thing is, if we go back to our component hello world, we have just clicked a standard URL here, but we've actually got back to the record that we were working with. So for that reason, these variables here are not just straightforward instance variables, and you can read about the state variables, as they're called here on this page here, but the state of where you are is actually saved, so that whenever we go back in the admin area to that component, it will remember where we were and will show us those records rather than going back to the start. And you can read a bit on that page about how that works, if you like. Okay, so that's about it. In summary, we have got a fair bit of functionality here for free. We have got our pagination and we've got get items. So what we need for our get items, we need to call get items, and we need to pass, or we need to provide a get list query, which is going to be used by JModelList. And for our pagination, we call get pagination and store the instance, and then we've got lots of functionality which we can then use, for example in the layout, to get list footer. So a lot of functionality that comes for very little cost for us. And something you might like to try is on our pagination here. these are the sorts of methods that we can use. So one other which you can use here, for example, is get limit box. Creates a drop-down box for selecting how many records to show per page. So if we go back onto our extensions page, oops. We can see this box here to the right, which we can change. So you can actually go ahead and try adding that to our hello world and see what effect that has on the rest. Okay, thanks very much for listening. In the second video, I'll be looking at some of the HTML and JavaScript aspects. Thanks, bye.